Up the intro.
Yes, yes, yes.
Classic.
So what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the OG Dad Off the Record podcast. I am your host, the OG Dad himself, and we are approaching the new year, ladies and gentlemen. So welcome. And I just want to take a moment to wrap things up and just talk. No huge production, no great cinematic moments, just sort of kind of giving an explanation on, the gaps of episode and content that have been missing. And, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that I'm very much still here. The show is still here. But, I definitely had to, kind of give some time and some thought to, the next episode I wanted to produce. I actually had something else in mind, but this felt like a really good time to kind of acknowledge, the pause on, the whole production and, everything that goes into this podcast. I know it is, on the surface level, it just looks like press and record. And yeah, that's a fair assessment to have. That's a fair argument to have. But, a lot of planning and just kind of thought goes into making sure each episode, is its best version of itself. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to that. And I just want to always make sure that I'm, kind of putting out the best episode possible. So this, again, not an excuse, but, things, life be lifing sometimes. And, I really do get caught up in some of the dad obstacles and the husband obstacles and just general tiredness of everything. And, not really acknowledging when I'm not taking time for myself, which was, which kind of motivated this episode. And I really wanted to give it some thought and some real, put in some real work to make sure that, if I am going to stick with it, that, I continue to do it. I don't know if it's going to be on a schedule. It's never been on a schedule, but certainly, it's at least consistent with the episodes. Cause, I think the last one, correct me if I'm wrong, was close to a month ago. So I just want to make sure that you all know, listener or viewer, that, I am still here. Things are still happening with the show. I did tweak things up as far as my studio is concerned. And I think, first things first, my office/studio is not super big. It's pretty small, but again, not an excuse to not make these episodes happen. And, I just think that I'm always unconsciously or subconsciously just kind of looking for an excuse to not, produce an episode. And my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, actually, they're always in my ear about, in a good way, always in my ear about producing another episode and, making sure they let me know that they're listening and they really enjoy it and I should keep doing it. So this isn't a promise to the listener, viewer, dear listener or viewer. This is just some kind of self-reflection for myself to keep doing what I'm doing in a consistent way. And hopefully you all are still tuned in, however you are subscribed, whether it be video or audio, which I'm very proud of the fact that I can do both. And, a lot of work goes into producing your own podcast, especially when you're your own editor and, you don't have any deadlines to meet, but, it's still a lot of work that kind of goes into it. And, I just want to make sure that, people kind of recognize, that is one of the biggest obstacles that I have. And, they're just kind of patient with me and, give me that motivation I need. And, I challenge you to give me that motivation I need because, I get in my own head about not putting these episodes out. And I definitely support and appreciate, I appreciate, not support, but, I support them too, but, I definitely appreciate, the people that just kind of, kick me in the back of the pants and say, hey, you're doing good stuff. Keep doing good stuff. And I can't wait for the next one. And then I just feel bad, like, man, I didn't put out an episode and, X amount of weeks. And I swear I'm always counting the weeks. And I'm always looking at the subscriptions that, that I'm subscribed to. That's just like going to waste because I'm not using any of it. I just, I feel bad about that, right? Just, just like you're like wasting money. And I need to get serious about it. And even though, this isn't what I do. Okay. Full disclosure. This is actually what I do for a living, but but this show doesn't make me any money. So I'm a video production engineer at a nonprofit, and I actually do this. I don't do the behind the camera or in front of the camera part. I'm mostly behind the camera, and I do all the editing and the stuff like that. So it's a little bit different when you're getting paid for it, number one, but number two, also just kind of, there are deadlines to meet, and you just kind of, you're kind of forced into meeting that expectation because it's literally how I make a living. So, I think by the time, I'm, fulfilling husband duties, fulfilling, father duties, because, why else would you be here listening, or even work duties? I forget to stop and take a moment and, do this for myself. Cause, I have all these neat little, toys that that help me produce this in an efficient way, and I'm just letting it collect dust, and I feel really bad about that. So this is not a promise. First and foremost, this is just a reigniting of the flame, so to speak, because I need to get back out there, and I need to continue to produce more episodes and have more guests. And I have my inbox is starting to fill up with people who might be interested in the show, and I'm ignoring it. So I really need to kind of lock in on the creative part outside of me doing this for a living. If any of what I said just made any sense, hopefully it did. And it's just a self-reflection episode, so to speak, to get me back into the zone and reignite my passion for doing this, because I do love doing this. And the fact that I get paid to do it is amazing. The fact that, I have the means to go out and kind of purchase these things and is also pretty amazing. And, I'm not worried about benefiting from this financially, because that's not what this is about. This is about putting out my message as a dad, putting out my message as an individual away from being a dad. And I want to make sure it's the best version of itself. And, sometimes I think I get so locked in about it being perfect that I just don't do it until, I feel like it's ready to be done. But if I always went off of that mentality, like my last episode, I accidentally forgot to record, and it didn't even matter because I still put it out even after the fact, because it's one of those things that's so discouraging. You just kind of like, I'm just not even going to put it out. But, I did, and, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. People still loved it. And, the message was still really important, and that's all that matters. So I thank you all for continuing to support me and, kind of encourage me, on this journey. And, in 2026, hopefully we can, take it from there. So, yeah. So being a father, it's a challenge, right? It is one of the most, so being a father is very, very tough. It takes a lot of emotional energy out of you. Just earlier today, my daughter, she's almost 22 months, almost, but like it is real 2-year-old energy. And, it's a real challenge. And I think, for the first year and a half, you got it pretty easy. As we approach the second year, I realized she's full of emotions, and she's going to say no at some point. And I'm going to have to be calm and cool and collected, when I ask her to do something. Like earlier today, asking her to, get a tissue or something. There's nose running. She's, getting over a cold or whatever. And, she's just like, no. And I'm like, can you please get one? And in my head, I'm starting to bubble up, and I'm like, just go get a tissue. It's really not worth the emotional meltdown she'll experience in a few minutes. But I just really had to sit there and just kind of think about how I wanted to approach this. And my wife was sitting next to me, so we were both kind of just like, we were very much on the same accord when it came to that moment, and what we needed to do for her, and what she needed, what the thing we needed for her to do. And it was just mind boggling. And it's like almost, it's a little painful a little bit, but I think a tiny bit of it for me is just kind of smiling a little bit, just because now she's starting to really get that autonomy, and she knows what boundaries she can cross and what boundaries she can't cross. And she knows exactly what she'll get away with. And, we'll smile and all will be well, and, we'll move on to the next thing. But, earlier today, it just really felt like she was like presenting a challenge. Like she really didn't want to do it. She really didn't want to like get the tissue, which was, across the room. It's not like it's far and we keep it in a difficult place for her to reach. It's literally there. You can see it. And, I realized that was the moment where it's like, oh, this is going to be like, this is the thing my dad was kind of talking to me about. He's like, oh yeah, the first year and a half is good, but wait till you get that 2-year-old. And, sure enough, it's starting to rear its head. And, we're starting to kind of see just the big personality she has. And, we mostly love it and enjoy it, but there's that small little bit where we're just like, just go do what I say. Just go do what I say. Just wanted to just kind of reflect on that and think about, in that moment, what it meant for me, what it meant for my wife, and what it meant for our almost 2-year-old. And that, we're going to have to teach her, patience, and we're going to have to practice patience, right? Just like, we have to teach her, certain things, and she has the autonomy to say yes and no, and she understands questions and she understands statements, but like, we have to teach her, when to kind of, put her foot down. Well, she gonna put her foot down when she gonna put her foot down. But, in the moment, I think about, I think about that moment and just like taking it a step further and thinking about, just general safety and what that would mean if she, refuses to do anything or move anything, if it affects her safety. It just made me realize, we're just gonna have to teach her the patience, and we're gonna have to practice that patience, and really utilize please and thank you, which we do, and you're welcome, and excuse me, and things like that. So that was, I'm excited, but I'm also really just kind of like zonked out of my mind, and I'm just tired. And yesterday was Christmas, so we're coming off of a Christmas rush, particularly her, just because she got all the Emerald toys you could possibly want, and all the Miss Rachel toys you could possibly want. So she's really blessed in that way. And again, one could say she's spoiled, but I don't think we spoil her. But she is an only child, so with that comes for her is probably a certain level of comfortability. And I had siblings, and it was always share with your brother, share with your sister, and she ain't got to share with nobody. Like that is, so it's my emotional energy is kind of gone a little lower from that, which again, another reason why I wanted to do this particular episode, because this is always my recharge. Yes, it's a lot of work. Yes, it can be difficult, and sometimes cameras go out, and sometimes you don't hit record. But when I'm having moments like that, or something work related or whatever, this is like, and I talk about work related only to go home and do more of the production stuff. But this is my outlet. And when things like that happen, I haven't been indulging, or I haven't been participating, or I put the episode off for X, Y, and Z reason. And, for the life of me, I can't really think about, it's not an excuse, but that's what's been happening. And, moving forward, I will, have to get in gear and just lock in and just commit to it. Put something on the calendar. My wife and I, we share a calendar for, stuff we have going on for work or personal or whatever. And, if I can commit to putting it on the calendar, I would commit to actually doing it. So I think, just little things like that would help. I've also started reading Atomic Habits, and I'm not that far into it. So don't ask me what my favorite chapter is. But, just kind of reflecting on, what these last few weeks have been like up until Christmas. And, just, generally since this show has started, I really want to be consistent with this and making sure that, when I am doing it, it's not halfway. And I'm really just kind of, putting this out the way it's intended to be. So, I'm going on a tangent, but thank you for rocking with me. But moving on from that, enough of all this mushy stuff, so, the emotional energy, drained, the mental load you kind of take on, the physical tiredness. I never knew a 2-year-old could weigh so much. And I just always was like, oh my gosh, she's so heavy. And I'm so tired and my back hurts and my knee hurts. And, and it's just like, again, not an excuse. I'm just making excuses for something that I would totally not get paid to do. Not an excuse, but, those things do happen. Like, I've been having knee pain most of my adult life. So, that can't be the excuse to not be doing this when I have, when I did a podcast previously before and I had that same knee pain. So, not an excuse, the mental load you kind of take on with, a child screaming at you or things not going well at work or things not going well at home. Hopefully none of that is the case, but those things do happen. And, sometimes, you have to take those moments for yourself. And again, I wasn't taking those moments for myself. And when those things happen or when those things don't happen, it starts to build up and you start to, get curious about, your purpose and, you start questioning everything and, you really do have to kind of reset your mind and, go on your walks or do whatever it is you do in order to get back to that place. And, sometimes I just kind of write it out on my tablet, just tinker around with nothing in particular projects. I'm just seeing if I could do it, just seeing if I could, just seeing if I still got the skill. And I'm really, really wanting to commit to it and just let that be how I breathe, right? Like, I just want to eat, sleep, and breathe, this content creation or this podcast making or, whatever it is. But again, like parenthood takes priority, marriagehood takes priority. And then, you kind of have to check on yourself. But if you're not doing okay, then, all the other things fail. So, just make sure you're taking care of you and you're really just kind of, refocusing when you need to, when it comes to finding, what brings a spark to your life. And I think the last thing is, just kind of being present at home, even when you're tired. So like, even when you've had a long day and you're working and stuff like that, you still want to be very present, to your partner, to your husband, to your wife, whoever, to your kid, to your kids, plural. You still want to be present, despite how tired you are. Just, it's a tricky thing to like still want to fully participate and commit to being, all those things while also still trying to find yourself in it all. That can be very difficult. And, sometimes I find myself just not, I'm going back to what I said before, is just kind of recentering yourself, and you got to find yourself and take time for yourself. And my wife and I, we talked about it. And, I forget where we were going. We were actually in the car when we first started talking about it. And, she really, really, really supports my hobbies, whatever they are. She really wants me to pour into it. She really wants me to pour into podcasting more. And, I really appreciate that about her, because she's such a she's such a career woman, and just kind of like, and I actually admire her for that. It's just, she's so career focused, and it's great. And she finds time to be a mom. She finds time, to be a wife. I feel like she's choosing herself, which is what I always encourage her. I always encourage her to do is, hey, you want the career, you want the family, you want the marriage, you can have all those things. I'm here to support you. I'm here to, get in where I need to fit in. You know what I'm saying? And, when we talk about me, and, I just never really know where I fit and how I can do all those things. And she just reminds me, like, you've done it before, like, you have it in you, and you just got to recenter yourself. So, I sound like a broken record, but it really comes back to all those things. So the time didn't disappear, it just got reassigned, if that makes any sense. So as I mentioned before, I literally do this for a living. I've been producing content for my job now for the better part of a year. I've always kind of had that background, and I was actually doing something different with my job, but it, hasn't been until recently to where they kind of fully committed on me, and they took a bet on me and kind of gambled on me to really pour into these projects that we're coming up with and producing. And, I'm really excited about that, because it's, I'm doing the thing that, that I was meant to do. And, I think doing it for work feels different, just because there's more motivation to put content out there outside, for me anyway, outside of it being because I get paid to do this. As I said before, I work for a nonprofit, and spreading the message is way more important to me than anything else that's on my plate right now. So, I really want to get my company's message and name out there, even though we've been around for a while. And, I know that, this content making and building is going to be the path of righteousness, right? Like we're gonna put out some great things. We got a few great things kind of lined up. We have this ongoing podcast that's been around for since the start of the year, and then now we're starting to lock in on like other projects and other kind of series that we're putting together. So I'm really excited about that. And I think, when it comes to kind of the structure at work, it's a little bit different, just because, again, there are time constraints, there's an expectation, and, people kind of rely on you to, make sure you're the guy that can press record or do the edits, or, make sure things are streamlined, even if you're not, mostly part of the project, versus me just kind of doing this at home when, the guardrails are down and no one's paying attention, and it's not time sensitive. And I am where the buck stops. Like, I don't have to send this to somebody and send it off and, have it be double checked. It's just, kind of me just putting it out as I want to. And, it's, it's a little loosey goosey with the schedule, but hey, at work, I'm producing, with with OG Dad, I'm processing, right? Like I'm sitting here literally pulling out feelings and trying to make sense of the situation, versus, what I do for work, where I'm literally, we have the ideas, we kind of know what's going to be released soon, and like I'm literally just producing the content that goes out. So, it's a huge difference when, I'm literally doing the same thing at work versus, and the studio's bigger, by the way. That's not an excuse, it's just reality, but it is bigger. But yeah, like, at work, I'm literally producing, here, in my own studio, it's just me and my ideas, and, there's no one that can tell me no. And it's rewarding, and it's fulfilling, and it's also terrifying. And I think I'm afraid of, the potential success, even though I'm not successful at this at all, that could come with it. And I think that, I just need to get over it. And I always say that, there's no real expectation for this, but I think deep down the hope is that someday there would be an expectation. And I think that's kind of where I sit with, producing my own content versus producing, the thing I actually get paid to do at work. Which kind of leads me into my next point, of, the expectation to always be consistent. And I think it's never really been there. Now that I think about it, I don't think it's ever been there. I think that when it comes to this, I think I've had a few people say, "Hey, when's the next episode coming?" But there was never any pressure. I just never felt like there was any pressure to do it. But for some reason, I have it in my head, like I'm gonna put this out, and a million people will watch it, and they'll hate it. When that's never the case. As far as I know, this is getting pushed out to an empty void and no one's watched it. So I think I need to just kind of behave that way when it comes to my own content. And just, I think someday I would love the expectation to be, hey, we're really excited for this and we want you to put out more. And I would equally say, I'm really excited to jump on this mic and put out more. And, I think I'm afraid of being successful at it. And, I think that's something I'm actively working on. And, I recognize it as well. Not the best trait, because I don't teach that to my daughter. But, I need to kind of reinforce it and just kind of like let that be one of my daily prayers when I get up and, kind of get my day going. And then, because I really feel bad when I don't, like, I feel guilty about not putting out, episodes consistently. And I know I shouldn't. And, I don't know what it is. I just feel really bad when, another week has passed. And it's not even the fact that I pay for, the subscriptions or anything. I just feel bad that I have this, I created this whole platform and, it's just kind of getting unused. And, that's the true sin. It's just having the means to do it and just not doing it, not reaching that potential. And I think that, I gotta put up or shut up, either delete it forever and never jump on the mic again, or, reassess and realign and, keep going. I think, there'll be some moments, some down moments, but it's okay to, there can't be any down moments in the beginning though, I have no excuse. But, I think that, you just got to reassess and realign and just, put yourself out there. Just make another episode, put it out there. And, people ask me all the time about, what it takes to start a podcast, what it takes to, do a YouTube video, whatever. And honestly, I just tell them I'm asking, I like to ask a lot of questions. Some of the first questions I ask is, I'll ask is, what kind of camera do you have? And then what kind of phone you have, right? So, because if the camera's good, and it's like, oh, great, use that, point and shoot. That's all you need. And if they don't have a camera or they don't have a great camera and they have a good phone, and I say, well, what kind of phone you have? Oh, iPhone 16, iPhone 17, iPhone 15, iPhone 11. Still good cameras. Use those. So, that's the advice I give people who ask me, right? When I started, there was no camera involved. I had a Samsung Galaxy S6, which got ran over by a semi truck. And I had like a pair of like headphones I would use for like gaming, and because I needed a mic. So that's kind of how I started. And, now I'm in a place to where, the mics and the video switchers and the computer and the cameras, all that stuff kind of comes together to do the one thing that I did on my phone. And, I'd let people know, hey, you can use your phone. You can use your webcam on your laptop or your tablet. Like, you can literally start it with the current tech that you have, and just keep producing, keep pushing content out, and upgrade your stuff over time. And I think that sometimes we get caught up in, and this is for my content makers, I think sometimes we get caught up in the equipment we have or the equipment we don't have, and we use it as an excuse to not push out a video or audio or whatever it is you're working on. And that can be kind of crushing, right? Because you think about it and you get on YouTube and you see people like, well, they're using this and they have that and they have this and they have that, but they didn't always have it. Now things are different today where people can go out to, heck, you can go to Walmart and, start a podcast, but they get caught up in the brands and the names and the Hollyland and the roads and the ATEMs and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, people mostly care about what you have to say, and they're not going to be clocking your equipment. They're really not. You're going to have some people who might be curious about it, and that's fine. People are going to ask questions. People ask, what I shoot with all the time, what I'm recording on all the time, and that's okay. And, when you get to that point and you're ready to, go out and get that equipment, then do it. But, until then, work with what you have. And, I have to also take my own advice and work with what I have. And just take that advice and run with that. When I think about kind of pushing out content and pushing out a project, I always want to kind of slow the editing process down. I really want to kind of think about what I want the message to reflect and what I want the message to kind of reveal to the audience. I don't want it to be rushed. And again, here's a reason, not reason why I haven't produced content. It's just, I don't really want to rush the content out. There's so many, first and foremost, I'm not a fan of shorts. But I understand why we have them, and they're great in spurts, but I don't like them mostly. But, when I look at some people's video and I see a video that's not particularly good and subjective, whatever, my opinion, I wish they didn't put it out. Like, I wish more thought kind of went into the video, because you'll have a good premise, you'll see it, and you're like, that wasn't funny. Like, and I'm legitimately like, that wasn't a good video. And then what I'm really saying is, I can put out way better content than that, and I haven't. Why not? I think about the fact that sometimes I don't like to rush a project and I want it to mean something. And, if you just want to put out kind of just endless stuff and, you want people to laugh and you don't want them to get deep when it comes to some of the videos you make, then that's fine. Like that's totally fine. But when I think about, the stuff I want to put out, I think about the meaning, unless it's intended to be funny, unless it's intended to be light, I really want to think about the meaning of it. And I want to make sure that it's produced well and it's mixed well and it sounds good. So when it's yours, you feel everything more. And, I think when I get critiques, I get in my feelings about it, and no one's actually critiqued it. And that's the thing. Like, I'm just waiting for that shoe to drop, I think. But but when it comes to putting out a project, I definitely don't want to rush it. I just kind of want to slow down with it and, make sure it is meeting my expectation and I say that and I think about my last episode where I forgot to press record, but I want to make sure it's meeting my expectation and that it's meaningful. So, I think not an excuse, but, certainly one of the reasons that's kind of been holding me back from, putting out more projects consistently. It's just, just kind of reflecting and, thinking about the content I'm actually producing and, want to focus on. So like I said before, I think letting go of that hustle culture, for me is probably the path of righteousness for me. Not to say that I'm not going to have the ambition, not to say that I'm not going to be driven, but, it's not a race. I'm not in competition with anybody. And just kind of, choosing my presence, over the output, and just, I really do like the time that passes in between episodes, because it gives me some time to kind of think and reflect, but also gives me an opportunity to really come up with a good topic or theme or, whatever it is that I want to do next. I've been working on some other things kind of in the background, And I think that's okay too. Like, it'll present itself when it's ready. And, I think that, that hustle mentality, you gotta go, and you gotta get it and get in front of everybody's eyeballs before everybody else. That doesn't work for me because, at the end of the day, like, your opinion is your own, and I can't change it if it goes out first or third or last. Like, your opinion about, the show certainly, won't mean anything if there's no show to talk about. So, the catch 22 there I'm thinking about out loud is certainly hilarious. And I think progress doesn't always need to be public. And when I tell you that progress is happening, I mean it. Do you see it right now in front of you? I mean, maybe. I don't know. But, I think, when it comes to a show like this and kind of me talking to you or me talking with a guest, I think that, when I work on myself, maybe you'll see it, maybe you won't. But I promise it's happening. And that's really all I can promise. Until you see me on a syndicated network or a streaming platform, then, it's going to look like this, until I decide, it's going to look like something else. I don't know. Anyways, upon New Year reflections, we're avoiding resolutions this year, whether if you have them or not. The OG dad himself is avoiding the New Year's resolutions. I'm choosing, awareness over promises. I'm not going to promise anything. I'm going to be self-aware and assume responsibility for my lack of produced episodes. And, I'm not going to promise you that the next episode will be out in 2 weeks, but I will say that I'm making an effort to produce more at a higher rate. That's what I can say. And finally, I'm not resetting. I'm just realigning. I'm not a new and improved OG dad. I'm just, I'm putting myself in a position of assurance. And I hope that you all are patient and that you'll give me honest feedback when you want to give feedback. There's no requirement. And that you're enjoying the show overall. So with that, I want to thank everyone for listening to the OG Dad Off the Record podcast. I am your host, the OG Dad himself. You can listen to the show or stream the show, watch the show right there on YouTube. You can listen to the show on Spotify. I'm on Apple Podcasts. I'm also on Amazon Music or Audible. I'm not sure which one it goes by. I'm also on iHeartRadio. I think there are a few other platforms out there. So OG Dad signing off for the last time in 2025. I hope you all have a fantastic New Year holiday. OG Dad out. Y'all take care. Peace.